Today's episode is sponsored by Blinkist, the app that lets you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try Blinkist totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right below this video. You all probably know by now that when channels like mine, shows like mine, talk about stories like the one I'm about to talk about, we get demonetized and penalized on YouTube and Facebook. But what has been captured on video over the last 24 to 48 hours is too insane, and it's too important not to tell you about it and to show it to you. So let's dig right into it. First of all, New York Police Department officers have been caught on video beating a cyclist with batons as he tries to cross the street. The cyclist seems to be crossing his bike while wearing a helmet at a crosswalk, mind you, not even jaywalking. And multiple officers are just beating the crap out of him. And it looks like they're beating the cyclist on the upper leg. Eventually, the cyclist is forced off of his bike before the video ends. We don't know exactly what led up to it. But at this point in the video, this is not an individual that is resisting, and there are multiple officers beating him with batons. And this led to Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to tweet, quote, "Horrifying. You start with the tiny possibility that two officers may be walking over to de-escalate the abusive one. Instead, they join in beating a man trying to get out of traffic. This isn't a problem of bad apples or incidents. This is an institutional and systemic crisis." And the reason I'm picking this incident to talk about is that Congresswoman AOC's response mirrors exactly what I've been talking about all week when she says, this isn't a problem of bad apples or incidents. This is an institutional and systemic crisis. When I did my first commentary about the protests and the civil unrest that we're experiencing on the Monday show, that was the main point that I tried to make. There were really 2 points. Point one was, anybody claiming some grand unifying theory about this is all about capitalism. This is all about race. This is all about police brutality. It's not. So any grand unifying theory that focuses on one element is destined to fall short. But maybe most importantly, that the individual incidents may give us a window into the systemic problems, a lens, a suggestion, but really, we need to be talking about the systemic aspects that are plaguing our country. And the debate over good and bad police doesn't actually address the systemic issues that are at the heart of much of what is going on. In another video from North Carolina, police likewise were filmed. In this video, they are destroying elements of medical, for lack of a better term, a sort of medical station that had some medics and basic first aid supplies and a lot of bottled water. You can see in this video, police standing above a ton of destroyed and poured out bottled water there in Asheville, North Carolina. A report said that police hit some of the medics with their shields and knocked people to the ground. And this is, again, we can talk about individuals, but there's something particularly nefarious in this instance because of the principle called medical neutrality. So we have norms that are being ignored. We've talked about you don't go after press, and we've seen press attacked both by some protesters and by police in different places over the last week. But now we're talking about the principle of medical neutrality. In any conflict, you do not go after anybody who is providing medical services. You have a protest, you have police. Most protesters are peaceful. Most police are good. There's some scuffle. You do not pull the medical people into it. Police may try to argue, well, if the medical people weren't there, the protesters would be less brazen and aggressive. No. At the international level, going after medical is a violation of the Geneva Convention. These are, of course, domestic protests. We're talking about domestic law enforcement. The Geneva Conventions don't apply. But if this conflict, instead of being between protesters and looters or police and protesters or police and looters or whatever, if this were a conflict between two countries and the Geneva Convention rules applied, either side destroying medical elements would be a violation of the Geneva Convention. So we've got attacks on media, people from the press hit with rubber bullets, sprayed, hit with shields, almost everything we've seen over the last 7 days. The point of this segment is not let's pick on police or particular police any more than I pick on individual protesters. Most protesters are peaceful. Protesters are peaceful. The ones that aren't peaceful are really not protesters. They're doing other things. They're looters, they're instigators, inciters, whatever, provocateurs. Police are mostly doing the right thing, and we have shows of support and kneeling and singing and everything with police from all over the country. But this is about the bigger picture. We have a horrible situation going on, much of it because of protests, because of police brutality. And we are seeing everything from cyclists beaten to a medical station destroyed to a president saying, hey, here's an idea for how to solve the protests and unrest caused by police brutality. Let's encourage more brutality against protesters. Everything we are seeing at a systemic level is the opposite of what we need. Thankfully, at the individual level, many police departments have been great. Many individual officers have been great. We've seen protesters bringing water to police. We've seen police joining protesters and all of this stuff. But unless the systems are changed, nothing will change. And so later on today, a lot of people on my streams this week and via email have been saying, David, can you explain how to deal with police brutality? And essentially none of it has to do with the individual. It is all systemic changes, and I'm going to outline them for you a little bit later on in the program. Okay, we're going to have more about this next topic coming up next week, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but I think given the events of the last 7 days, it bears mention. If we've learned anything over the last 7 days, yes, we've confirmed that Donald Trump can't lead, but we knew that. But we've also gotten reinforcement that Donald Trump is not going to go peacefully if he loses to Joe Biden in November. Now, I've said before, this is not some ominous conspiracy theory where Donald Trump will be able to stay in power indefinitely like a king. I continue to believe that if Donald Trump loses in November, he will leave. He will leave eventually, but he's going to do it under protest, and it's not going to be what we traditionally think of as a peaceful transition of power. Remember, he won in 2016 and has been arguing that it was rigged against him. Okay, he won and has spent 3 years saying the results can't be trusted. Yale forensic psychiatrist Dr. Bandy Lee is now warning that the shows of strength, really the shows of false strength, false displays of strength from Donald Trump over the last week foreshadow his likely behavior if he loses the 2020 election. So when we say false displays of strength, we mean the Bible photo op, the tweets and statements about sending in the military, his obvious lie that he didn't go to the bunker for protection on Friday, he went to inspect the bunker. Give me a break, dude. The idea is that all of these completely transparent shows of supposed strength are Trump laying the framework for continuing to build illegitimate power so that later, in 5 months, he will question the results of the election. Here's another example. Blaming the protests on Antifa in order to try to disqualify the overwhelmingly peaceful protesters and their completely respectable and real motives for protesting. So it's interesting to see a psychiatrist put a name to it, but the reaction from anybody who's been paying attention is, well, yeah, Trump has been laying the groundwork to complain about the upcoming election results for a long time. Democrats can only win if they cheat. That's another one that Trump has been using off and on for the last year. Trump has slowly been ratcheting up the authoritarianism, culminating so far Monday with his threat to send in the military against the demands of governors. Even these little authoritarian slides tighten his grip a tiny bit. His priority has always been personal power, and we have to be prepared for him to challenge the results in November. And this is not about martial law. This is not about suspending elections and declaring himself king. I believe he will go, but we have to ensure that our institutions are actually prepared to remove him when it happens. And it may not even, even remove suggests someone's going to show up by force and remove Trump. It's more that our institutions just have to make it abundantly clear that if his term is ending, his term is ending. And if he's not reelected, someone else is coming in and that's it. And I still don't believe that there's going to be any removal by force. And I don't want to be a broken record, but he won and questioned the results. He won and questioned the results in November of 2016. Just imagine what will happen if he loses. Let me know what you expect in November on Twitter, where you can find me at dpacman. You can also get the daily audio podcast of the show for free on your favorite podcasting app, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, Google Play Podcasts, Stitcher, really whatever you want. Get the podcast. Let me know your thoughts about Trump in November on Twitter at dpacman. We have a packed show in store for you today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
What if you could read 10 books in just one sitting? That's exactly what one of my favorite apps lets you do. It's called Blinkist, and what they do is take thousands of popular nonfiction books. They condense them down into text or audio that you can consume in 15 minutes. Blinkist makes sure that you're getting all of the important core insights from each book. So it's perfect for exploring a book you otherwise wouldn't have time for. If there's a full book you're thinking about buying, you can use Blinkist to get a sample first. Just think how much you can enrich yourself by being able to soak up an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month. And you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Suzanne Adams and Keith Wald. Thanks to both of you for supporting the show with a membership. Also, thanks to Brandon Lonkar, who's today's longtime sustaining member of the day. Brandon's been a member for almost 5 years, an incredible amount of time. Join these great people by grabbing a membership at joinpakman.com. Okay, let's go to the phone lines at 617-830-4750 and see what is on people's minds. Starting with our caller from the 678. Caller from the 678 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, yeah, I've called you once before. Has there been, my first question, has there any protests where you've been living?
Sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. You said, are there protests where I'm living?
Yes.
Yeah, there's been protests in Boston, both in the downtown areas, in the Forest Hills area, which is a little bit outside of the city, in Brockton, which is really not Boston, it's the Boston area. There's been a bunch of protests, yeah.
My main question is, I see mostly the young people standing up for, people like George Floyd, and yet the boomers tend to look, they always send aside the police no matter what they do. Why is it that boomers, they always look down upon us for ever questioning the status quo when they were the ones during Vietnam protesting the status quo? What changed with them that made them so status quo-ish?
That's interesting. Well, so there's two parts. I mean, part one is, once you live with a system for a while and you feel that the system sort of works for you, you're less likely to demand that the system be radically changed. You with me sort of on that part, at least to start with?
Yeah.
Now, here's the other thing. So in terms of the protests, there is no doubt that the people protesting are disproportionately younger folks. I don't know that that's hugely surprising. It seems to me that at every era, it is overwhelmingly people between 20 and 40, 20 and 45 that are doing the protesting. And I think it's just by that. I don't know that that's unique to this situation. When you look at the ages of arrest, it's been mostly like 18 to 35-year-olds. I don't know that that means older folks aren't. If you look at the polling, it seems the country is pretty united on the Floyd fiasco.
Right. I just had, like I encountered like my mother who think if it doesn't involve them, my own mother thinks that if it doesn't involve her and her kids and grandkids, she shouldn't get involved. I just don't understand how people can just be so blind.
Well, unfortunately, it is not uncommon that a lot of folks don't really care much about an issue or consider it seriously until it affects them. Look at all these Republican congressmen who are anti-gay their whole lives. Then their kid or
Like
their
Dick Cheney.
nephew is gay, and they're like, you know what? I've seen the light. Now we need to do this. We need to do that. That's a sad reality about humanity that you've stumbled across. I don't think it's unique to your mom.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like Bill Maher called it the empathy gap. But
Yes.
I'm gonna let you go. Thank you for answering my question. That actually makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, my friend. Great to hear from you. Thank you so much. Let's go to Dontel in Florida. Dontel in Florida. What's going on, Dontel?
Hey, David. First, I want to say that you've been doing. I appreciate that you've been doing what you can to provide a nuanced take to all the protests and what's going on right now.
Thank you.
And so I have two topics about these protests that I want to talk about. The first is the stunning display of gratuitous violence and lawlessness from police officers in police departments across the country.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, as people are protesting police brutality.
Right. And in fact, it's even worse than that, Dontel. And Dontel, please do me the favor of keeping the phone just a little further from your mouth, the mouthpiece, because you're coming in hot and we can't control it on our end too well right now. It's actually, there's an even crazier hypocrisy, which is all of this was catalyzed by police brutality. And the president came out and said, I think the governors need to be more brutal in their responses, which could not be more backwards. So yes, agree with you spot on with the first part. Go ahead.
And so these are the people who are their job. They are trained to maintain the peace.
Yes.
And what we're seeing is they're doing the exact opposite. They're the ones who are initiating the violence the overwhelming majority of the time at these peaceful protests. So, and a lot of the times when we see these videos, normally, when we see videos of police brutality, a lot of people in this country, on the left and on the right, they say that those are just the bad apples. The overwhelming majority of the police, they're good, they're law-abiding and all of that.
Yeah.
But all of that went up in smoke over the last few days when entire police departments and police precincts mobilized to violently break up lawful protests. And the good police officers, the law-abiding police officers, they didn't intervene and they didn't do anything while the other police officers were assaulting protesters, which is illegal, and they could be arrested for, by the way.
Yeah,
so
and in fact,
what do you think about?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so what do you think about the idea of the police officers who've been on video assaulting protesters and unlawfully breaking up constitutionally protected protests? What do you think about them being arrested and prosecuted?
Yeah, so I hope that they are. I mean, I hope every internal affairs, and I'm going to have a segment actually coming up later on the show today where I'm going to talk about exactly how police training should be totally restructured. But I hope that these videos that are spreading like wildfire are actually turned over and looked at by police internal investigation departments. My understanding is that there have been some officers caught on tape who already are now entering the discipline process. You know, we'll have to follow to see if anything actually comes of it. But I'm completely with you. And in fact, I tweeted a couple of days ago, are we building a list of names? Are we identifying the people that are so brutally going after even press, like people who are just there reporting on what's going on? They should all, we've got to be taking names and going after all of the ones that have broken the law.
And so the other topic I wanted to talk about is the looting. So yes, there are people who are opportunistic and they aren't really involved in the George Floyd protest,
right?
And they see this as an opportunity to take advantage of the situation. Yes, that's true.
Yep.
But there are also people who are involved in the protest who are engaged in looting too. So for me, it all comes back to the question of would people be rioting? Would people be looting if they were financially secure? Because people are forgetting we are in the middle of an economic depression. 40 million people have lost their jobs. 40% of small businesses might be permanently closed in the next couple months.
Right.
Thousands of landlords right now are in court filing for eviction, so that as soon as these temporary bans are lifted in the next couple of days, they can start throwing people out on the street. So, and the response from our government, Democrats and Republicans, has been to ignore the economic depression and leave people high and dry while they bail out corporations and the richest people in the country to the tune of trillions of dollars. And before all this even happened, we were already dealing with historic wealth inequality in this country. And the economic conditions for a lot of people was desperate. So when you add all this on top, of course, you're going to get looting. So my suggestion to people, if you want to stop the looting, if you want to limit the looting, it's not to shame the people who are out there doing it. It's not you're not going to do it by, quote, calling them out. If you want them to stop looting, the way I see it, the best way to do it is to have them organize and do targeted protests at the politicians, at Congress, who are denying
I got you,
them
Dontel.
any economic relief.
I think I get the point, Dontel. You're coming in so distorted that I'm going to have to let you go. But I basically agree with you. However, I wouldn't absolve any individual looter of the fact that they are breaking the law. But you're completely right that we can't ignore the circumstances that lead to people feeling like they need to loot. There's no question about it. I'm with you, Dontel, on that. Okay, I'm going to let you go. And we thought our phone system was working perfectly, and then Dontel was just coming in so hot. Going to have to keep looking into that. Let's go next to our caller from the 315 area code. Who's calling today from 315?
Am I on?
Yes, you are. Who's this?
Hi, I'm Phil from
Phil, what's up?
Syracuse. Hi, first-time caller. I was just thinking about how all this is going to impact the election and impact just politics going forward through the rest of the year and beyond. I mean, the current protests as well as the pandemic. I mean, I would want to believe that this is going to really be a 1-2 punch to Trump, to the Republicans. But I've been concerned about a backlash coming, and as well as, I think even if the Republicans are taken out and Trump's taken out in the election, that they tend to do better as an opposition, and they tend to do better campaigning and having something or have someone to run against. And so I just wonder if any good can be made from this, if we can get Democrats and progressives into positions of power to affect change, that it's not going to lead to kind of a similar backlash, just like after Obama and Democrats came in after Bush. And then
so listen, there's a lot of questions in there. Let's address at least a couple of the things you're mentioning. First of all, of course, Republicans are going to take whoever is ever in power on the Democratic side, demonize them, fundraise by lying about them, come up with the most horrible allegations and assert. Of course, that's going to happen. If we say, well, then we'd better not elect anybody, then we're just going to lose every election. So of course they're going to do it. We need to be better at fighting them rather than ceding the space and conceding that to them. Your first question was, could there be a backlash and Trump rockets to re-election in November? I think the answer is yes. And this is why I've been urging such caution. Right now, we've got a disastrous economic situation, partially fueled by a disastrous reaction by Trump to the pandemic, combined with Trump saying, hey, here's the solution to protests about police brutality. Let's send in the federal military to be even more brutal. Like, it's crazy. Joe Biden is up 11 in some polls. Okay. I think it is, you're very right to be skeptical that this is going to hold through November. If the protests die down, it's very unlikely the protests are going to last 5 months. If coronavirus continues to decline in a lot of places, I mean, it's going up in some places and it's very much down in some places. But if the economy starts to appear to be recovering, you could get a window of 6 weeks in late October into November where Trump gets himself reelected because people feel like, hey, things are getting back on track. And so I think we need to be very careful about looking at any of these polls that say, oh, Biden's going to crush him. Biden may crush Trump, Biden may lose, and we've got to be really careful about it.
Right, and obviously I've never been the type of person that felt like you shouldn't vote even if your candidate didn't win in the primary.
Yeah.
And also that I do believe that Trump does have a chance of winning still. Although again, I want to believe. I mean, I'm not going to let myself be lulled into a false sense of security, but I do want to believe that he's on his way out. I think I'm just very scarred from, because I came of age politically really when during Obama's first election, and that's when I think my beliefs started to become solidified. And I think just the backlash to him, how swift it was. I mean, I remember it was around when the Tea Party first cropped up. It was between like February or April 2009. I mean, if I recall correctly, it was very soon after he came in, and then it was the 2010 midterms. I just think that's something too. I mean, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but
yeah. Listen, Phil, here's what we got to do. Let's try to replace Trump with Biden. Let's try to take control of the Senate. We've got 5-6 good races that could be won. And then, okay, the opposition party tends to win in midterms, but maybe this time they don't. And then we fight for the 2022 midterms. We can't win the 2022 midterms this November. We can only win the elections that are this November, if that makes sense. All right, my friend, I'm going to let you go because I've got a bunch of people who want to get on. Let me take a quick break. If you're holding, don't hang up because we will get right back to the phones momentarily.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on your support, and the easiest way is through membership, which includes the world-famous bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show just for members. Sign up today at joinpakman.com. Coupon code saves you 40%. Vote soon 18.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We are taking your phone calls at 617-830-4750. Let me pick up on our caller from the 559 area code. Who's calling today from 559?
Hi, David. This is John.
Hey, John. What's up?
Hey, so I was wondering, what do you think the likelihood of the next president, either Democratic or Republican, whoever they may be, that they would create some sort of federal agency to oversee police investigations into like police violence and misconduct like that? And what do you think the effectiveness of such a agency could be?
So I don't know if we need a federal agency to oversee police. I think it would be really tough to get that done with police unions being as strong as they are. In the next segment, I am going to give my prescription for dealing with police violence, and I'm going to talk about databases of sorts. I think that we need two things, and I won't fully go into them because I'm going to do this next segment. Number one, there should be a national database of bad actors in police departments because right now it is too easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is too easy for a police officer to make a deal to leave a department because of wrongdoing or complaints, but it's done in a way where there's no place that future police departments can see this officer's history, and they end up rehiring a problem officer. And the vast majority of police officers are not the problem. The small percentage there are often are repeat offenders. So by just eliminating a few of these bad actors, you would dramatically reduce the number of bad acts, so to speak. So you establish a database of police officer complaints, and you require both that a police department has to report to the database and a new hiring police department must check the database so that nobody can get away with saying, we just didn't know. So that's one thing. The other thing is I think that we do need a review system for police shootings and use of force incidents that includes civilians, where in many cases, these things are reviewed essentially internally by police, sometimes in concert with, the DA's office in certain situations. I don't think that that's cutting it. I think we definitely need accountability to civilians as well. So those are a couple of the things I think we need to do. I think a federal agency to do the reviewing is going to be a tough sell.
Yeah, I was thinking that implicating such a system would probably, if anything, just cause a lot of backlash and, just add tension to the police union and stuff like that. But I had one other quick question about Trump and his Twitter account. He's trying to push forward the new restrictions on, them silencing conservative voices and whatever, making it easier to not get blocked, to be conservative or whatever.
Right.
So is that in order to help stop Twitter from blocking him the day he's no longer president?
I don't think that he's thinking ahead in that way whatsoever. I think that these are basically politically partisan things that Trump believes now will benefit his side. I don't think he's saying, I'm going to do this so that Twitter doesn't block me the day I'm out of. I just don't think he's.
You don't
I don't even think he's thinking that
about
far
that?
ahead. I honestly, I don't. I really don't.
Well, maybe he's just incapable of looking that far forward.
That's one of the reasons why. All right. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate the phone call. Great to hear from you. Let me pick up next on our caller from the 772 area code. 772, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
Yes, it is.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida.
Hey, Andrew, what's going on?
I just wanted to get your opinion about Kellyanne Conway and her husband, George Conway, and what the dynamic is between them. And I have a theory that she's the one that wrote that New York Times op-ed resistance piece, and that she is completely on board with George Conway's critiques of the president.
It's interesting you mentioned that. So you're not the first person that has suggested to me that it's Kellyanne Conway who wrote that anonymous critique of the Trump administration. For people who don't know, Kellyanne Conway is an advisor to Donald Trump and very public Trump defender. Her husband, George Conway, is a Republican who has been one of Trump's absolute biggest critics, funding all sorts of anti-Trump ads. And I mean, it's so people are having a hard time understanding how it is that they're just living together at home. Like, how is it possible that these two people could live together? So one of the ideas is exactly what Andrew is suggesting, which is they actually are on the same page when it comes to Trump, and Kellyanne is just publicly remaining positive about Trump, but privately actually is on board with George Conway. I don't know the answer, but I've publicly said before, I don't understand how their relationship works because, you've got James Carville and Mary Madeline, Democratic and Republican strategists who are married, but it seems as though they've figured out a way where they're not really fighting each other on any individual race typically. Conway and Conway, Kellyanne and George, I don't get how it works. And your idea that maybe behind the scenes they actually both hate Trump is certainly a possibility.
Yeah, I agree. Can I just ask you one more question?
Yeah.
How do you take your coffee, and what style of coffee do you like?
I almost exclusively am drinking espresso-based drinks right now. I'm not really like a drip or filter coffee guy. So typically, standard 6-ounce cappuccino is my go-to, certainly in the morning. And then, I might make a half calf. Now that it's quarantine, I'm making everything at home. So I can make a half calf iced latte now that it's warmer in the afternoon, or, could be a macchiato. If I'm feeling crazy, maybe I'll just have an espresso, but I'm mostly away from drip coffee and filter coffee and on espresso.
Okay. Do you ever drink mate, being from Argentina?
I don't. I'm not a big fan of it. It's never been a big thing for me.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thanks for taking my call.
Of course. All right. Thank you so much. Great to hear from you. Perfect phone call, I would say, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go next to our caller from the 540 area code. Who's calling today from 540? 540, please unmute if you have us muted. There you go. Yes, who's this?
Hey, David. How's it going? Mitch from Virginia here.
Hey, Mitch.
I was just calling in because I had watched some of your segments on voting for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. And myself, I'm kind of undecided at this point. I am not sure whether I'm not going to vote or whether I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden or whether I'll end up pulling the lever for him. But I had watched some of your segments, and to me, it kind of feels like for you, you're pulling the lever against Trump. And for me, I want to be more convinced by Biden.
Okay, so let me just pause there because I want to clarify my position.
Yeah.
Me voting for Joe Biden is not exclusively me voting against Trump. There are two people who might be the next president, and I'm choosing the better option. So, to characterize it as it's only a vote against Trump or it's a lesser of two evils, I don't want to put any of that sort of frosting on the cake, so to speak. It's here are the two choices, and it's so abundantly obvious which is the better choice that I'm very clear that I'm going to vote for the better choice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't mean to get your position wrong.
No problem.
So, I mean, I think you might benefit a little bit from maybe just talking more about what those things about Biden that you like. I know, like, general overview, and I mean, it's very clear that they have very different positions, right? But
right.
Maybe just talking about specific policies might help you. I don't know if the goal of your segments is to just state your position or to convince others.
No, so this is a very good question. I'm not trying to convince anyone, and I've not been shaming people who don't plan to vote for Joe Biden. What I am, if I'm evangelizing for anything, I'm evangelizing for everybody to be honest about why they are taking the action they plan to take. So there are some people on the left who are kind of playing coy where they don't like Trump, but they really only focus, at least publicly, on criticizing Biden. And they won't actually say they'd rather Trump to Biden. But it's like, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So if someone says, listen, you know what? I was a Bernie person. The reason I'm not voting for Joe Biden is because given these two choices, I actually believe, to hell with it, let Trump get another 4 years. Now, they might say that because they want to punish the DNC. They might say it because maybe they genuinely agree with Trump more on policy. But what I don't want is people kind of playing coy and playing this game where they're like, yeah, Trump is bad, but like Joe Biden in 94 didn't take Social Security cuts off the table. It's like, okay, but hold on. He's clearly not running on that now. That was 26 years ago. Do you prefer Trump or Biden now? If people come away and they're like, I prefer Trump. I'd rather Trump be president for the next 4 years. Beautiful. We're now clear on where you stand, but it's the playing coy about Biden being bad. But it's like, okay, so would you prefer Trump? It's like, listen, I'm just pointing out that the DNC screwed Bernie. Okay. Do you prefer Trump? Let's just be honest about why people are making their voting decisions. That's all I want. Vote however you want.
Yeah. So, I mean, I haven't seen personally like a whole lot of that. I mean, I guess you're saying like they're just pivoting, right? They're not saying which they prefer. They're not being upfront.
They're not being upfront sometimes about who they actually prefer, and they're not being upfront about their motives for focusing their criticism on Biden. And if they were transparent, if they're like, listen, I think Biden as a center-left candidate is going to make us worse off in the long run, which is why I'd rather it be Trump if it's not going to be Bernie. That's a position we can now actually talk about like adults. But if we don't really understand what the goal is of someone just saying, oh, Biden this, Biden that, well, then we can't even really talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely appreciate your coverage on all of this. You've been upfront and honest. So, and definitely everything that's going on now is definitely weighing heavily on me with the whole protests and Trump's reaction to it. It's really weighing heavily on
That's interesting. So, like,
started
at
to
some
go in
point,
November.
did you consider yourself a never Biden guy?
No, I don't think I ever considered myself a never Biden guy. I
Okay.
was a
Skeptical.
never Hillary person in 2016. I just felt very strongly, and I was a lot younger at that point, and newer to politics. But I just consider that I want to vote for someone and not against someone. And Biden's policies are lackluster to me. I mean, not to everybody, but to me. So,
Is there a particular Biden policy that you really dislike?
yeah, he's not for Medicare for all, so that's huge.
Right. And so is in your paradigm, so Bernie wants Medicare for all. Trump wants this crazy thing where 24 million people will lose coverage. Biden is into the idea of public option plus expanding. He said he likes the idea of expanding Medicare to 60 plus larger subsidies to people above and beyond the subsidies we have now. So it might give healthcare to, some tens of millions of additional people. Does the fact that Biden's position is so much better than Trump's weigh on you at all, or does it only matter that Biden's position is not Bernie's?
No, it matters to me that even though Biden's position is better than Trump's and is good, it is undeniably good, right? It is a positive thing to give healthcare to more people.
Yep.
It weighs on me more that his plan leaves 3 million more uninsured. So I feel like we should push for Medicare for all because...
Wait, hold on. How does Biden, you're saying, how does Biden's
healthcare
plan in the net leave 3 million more people uninsured? You just agreed that that's not the case.
No, not more than current. 3 million people total will not be covered by Biden's plan. So
okay, I got you. Okay.
3 million uninsured, he would only insure 10 of those 13.
Okay, but so then that's making you think you might vote for the guy who will take it away from 24 million more people?
Absolutely not.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, all right, very good, my friend. I appreciate the phone call. Thank you so much. That is all the time I have for today. I apologize I was not able to get to everybody. I will take calls again, believe you me.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Okay, let me get right into audience questions. We've gotten so many of them. So many things are going on. A lot of the topics are understandable and predictable, and I want to dig right into them. First one, David, will the protests and civil unrest be good or bad for Donald Trump in terms of his approval rating and his reelection chances in November? Listen, the answer is very much like it is on coronavirus. Donald Trump's response to coronavirus was a failed non-response. Donald Trump's response on the civil unrest has been worse than a non-response. We have unrest that started with what was seen as the brutal, unlawful killing by police of George Floyd. And Donald Trump tweeted in his bunker all weekend. Okay, he was in his bunker for a few hours, tweeted from the White House all weekend, including from the bunker on Friday night, only to come out on Monday and say, we need more police force. We need to further militarize law enforcement, right? So the worst possible thing that he could come out and say. But the Trumpists defended him on coronavirus, and the Trumpists will defend him on mostly will defend him on his response to the civil unrest. This works in the short term. I don't believe that this will work in the long term. So like with everything else, what matters is how long is this going to go on? Take coronavirus as an example. Failed response, completely failed response. Numbers are now starting to improve. States are opening up. Whether this will lead to a huge resurgence of the virus or not, we don't know. what will be happening in September, October, into the November election? We don't yet know, but Trump pretending everything is fine, even when it's not, only works for so long. 6 weeks ago, Trump said no more of these press briefings with doctors. I'll do CEO roundtables, blah, 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 all that stuff, and just basically pretend this is a business situation rather than a medical situation. In the immediate, it sort of worked. It did get a lot of Trumpists and right-wingers saying we're back and we're reopening and sort of disconnected from the realities. We still had 15 people die in a single day from coronavirus a few days ago. So if that continues, Trump's strategy is not going to work. Similarly, on civil unrest, if protests continue for months through the summer, as coronavirus doesn't go away, and Trump seems to be unable to control it, deploying the military happens with increased frequency, and it is seen as an authoritarian move from wannabe baby dictator Trump. A lot of people are going to react negatively. He will still have the core Trumpists that support him no matter what he does. As he said, if I could shoot people on Fifth Avenue, they'd still vote for me. He could send soldiers to shoot people on Fifth Avenue, and many people would still vote for Trump. But it is not going to appear to be a strong Trump. It is not going to be a Trump that appears in control. Even, earlier this week, the staged photo op propaganda event at St. John's Church in D.C., where Trump had protesters tear gassed and dispersed by police on horses so he could hold a Bible up the wrong way, like clearly held the Bible in a way no one who holds a Bible would ever hold a Bible, just to get that picture. Yeah, some people liked it, and there were some video edits done of it on Twitter where it's, with inspirational music and look at the great President Trump. It's not going to work for that long. If the protests continue, the buck at some point stops with the president. Even Trump said when there were protests under Barack Obama, nothing like what we're seeing now, that it's Obama's responsibility. And of course, it's different rules for Trump. We know that. But I do not believe that over the long term, coronavirus continuing is not going to be good for Trump, no matter how he propagandizes, because there are factual realities on the ground. A continued disastrous economy with 25% of the labor force that was working before this started 11 weeks ago, unemployed. It's not going to be good for Trump. Disastrous GDP numbers coming out in late August. It's not going to be good for Trump, no matter how he propagandizes. In much the same way, if the headlines continue to be things are out of control, yeah, you'll have Republicans saying, oh, it's all Democratic run. They'll say Democrat run cities that are having a problem. Well, urban areas are disproportionately Democratic. It doesn't, the cities that are having problems are mostly run by Democratic mayors, and the cities that aren't are as well, because that's the way it works. We have an urban-rural divide in this country. Those talking points will work for a little while, but they are not going to work all the way through to November if the unrest continues and Trump seems to be the flaccid, impotent guy that he is, who can't take control of a situation, who can't be presidential, who can't reduce tensions and rather inflames them. I think it will dramatically backfire. And by the way, Joe Biden is no miracle of progressive values. You all know that. But Joe Biden's been giving some pretty sensible speeches about the unrest and about coronavirus over the last 10 days. They've widely not been covered by corporate media. For all of the apoplectic shouting about liberal corporate media, they're covering what Trump says and does, and they're not covering what the challenger, who could be president in only, 7-8 months he could be inaugurated. They're not covering what he's saying, and he's making a lot of sense. I mean, even a lot of the Never Biden people that watch the show wrote to me over the last few days saying, I've got to vote for Biden. Clearly these guys are not the same. The last week has proven that, and Biden's being reasonable. Imagine if corporate media actually showed what Joe Biden has been doing and saying. I think it would be even more disastrous for Donald Trump. David, how should we actually deal with police brutality? Okay. In this segment, I'm not going to argue about what percentage of cops are good or bad, or try to quantify the degree to which police brutality and racialized policing is a problem. It is a problem. Rush Limbaugh said things that were, for Rush Limbaugh standards, conceding that we have a problem with policing in this country on The Breakfast Club earlier this week. Kellyanne Conway said it. Now, Kellyanne Conway also said, and Trump is dealing with it. That's a lie. I'm not going to argue about the degree to which it's a problem. It's a problem. There are many issues with policing that need to be solved. It doesn't matter if 92 or 94% of police are good, or whether it's 99.1 versus 99.3%. We've got a lot of issues that need to be solved. So here are some ideas. From the point of, so there's the legal side and there's the behavior side. Let's talk first about how police behave. We need to be looking at training and a lot of the infrastructure that's there. So police training in the United States should be completely reworked, for lack of a better term. If you look at many other countries, officers train much longer before they are just sent out to be police, okay? Now, there are going to be arguments about it costs too much. I'm telling you what should be done. Then we figure out how to make it happen. And by the way, we found $6 trillion. I think we can find a way to better train police if we decide we want to do it. Germany, as an example, trains police much longer. The United States, sometimes you've got like a 12 or 13 week training program and then you're out there. Sometimes it's, 6 months or whatever. Police training needs to be longer, and a lot more of the training needs to be more the type of training that social workers get. Academic stuff based on the principles that you would learn if you were studying for a master in social work, because you prevent a lot of crime. Straight out, just you prevent having to deal with crime. Then we'll get to how do you deal with crime. You prevent a lot of crime if you have police that are properly trained as social workers. In addition, there's a lot of stuff that's not actually criminal, or it's marginally criminalized as misdemeanors that can or cannot be enforced based on the discretion of officers, where if you have officers better trained in de-escalation, you have officers better trained with some of these soft skills, as we might call them, you reduce the number of interactions that become problematic. Number two, we need more extensive psychological and personality testing of police. And we want to just make sure we're bringing in the right people. Again, most cops are good. Some, like Trump, admitted on Twitter, they're looking for action. There's a sort of bloodlust in some fraction of police officers. Those officers understand this, and I don't want to get off topic here. The bad apples, the bad eggs, don't just typically do one bad thing. They do a whole bunch. So a huge portion of the overuse of force complaints and other bad acts are concentrated among a small number of repeat police offenders. If we did a better job of evaluating and psych testing and personality testing police, we could root out a lot of the problem by never hiring that small percentage that wants to get out there and slap people around and is looking to get the riot gear and do what we've seen being done on videos. So root them out with it more psychological and personality testing. There should probably be some established process for civilian review of police shootings and uses of force. It can't just be left to police departments to investigate, because we all know that there are many police chiefs that are doing this properly. We know that there are internal affairs boards that are operating more or less okay. We should probably have more civilian involvement in review of police shootings and uses of force. We've got to demilitarize. The militarization of police forces has been a huge problem. I've talked about that on its own, so I won't delve too much into that. And there should probably be a national database of bad police actors, because it would prevent two things. Number one, there's a national database of bad actors, police officers with a high number of complaints against them. It would prevent officers from hiding prior complaints by simply not reporting them when they're trying to get hired at a new police department, because there would be a national database. So reporting to the database should be mandatory. But also, if you're hiring a police officer, if you're not bringing them through police academy and you're giving them their first police job, it should be a requirement that police departments have to check with that central database, so that the police department can't get away with saying, we didn't know. We just didn't know, because it would be a requirement to report complaints to the database and to look at the database if you are hiring someone. Now, then you've got prosecution. In terms of prosecution, decisions on prosecution of police officers and the prosecution itself, meaning the trials, it should be happening ideally outside the county where the incidents took place. It can be very difficult to get what we would all call a fair trial, fair to the victims, fair to the officers, fair to everybody, fair to the community, when a lot of these cases are being tried inside the jurisdiction. Now, by the it might be outside of the town, but still in the county. And in a lot of America, that's not far enough. That's another thing that should be done. You've got to try and prosecute these cases outside, realistically, of the county where they took place. Some ideas, there are many more. I'd love to hear from you. Hey, David, it seems as though it is red states rather than blue states opening early from coronavirus and Republicans rather than Democrats who ignore social distancing and mask wearing. Is it possible that coronavirus could hand the election to Biden by killing more Republicans than Democrats? Okay, I understand the argument. If you've got a state like Michigan, for example, we'll just pick Michigan, and the Democratic voters are mostly following the guidelines and the Republican voters are not, aren't you going to get more Republican voters infected with the virus and thus more Republican voters will die, and it could flip Michigan from Trump in 2016 to Biden in 2020? So first of all, disclaimer, I hope it's not necessary. I don't want anybody to die. I'm not hoping anyone dies, Democrats, Republicans. It's a question about math, really, not a question about anything else. I don't believe the deaths are nearly numerous at this point for this to actually affect the outcome in any state. Let's look at an example. I mentioned Michigan. In 2016, Trump won Michigan by about 11,000 votes. Right now, Michigan has had 5,500 coronavirus deaths. Even if we imagine, which I'm sure is not the case, imagine that a full 80% of the people who died in Michigan are Trump voters. It's still not enough to flip an 11,000 vote margin. And that's a state where the margin was really, really small. Now, if Michigan ends up with 50,000 deaths and 80 or 85% of them were Trumpists, you might have enough to flip the state from Trump to Biden. The reality is it's unlikely Michigan is going to get 10x the deaths we've seen so far by election day. And I think the most important thing here, and again, I don't want anybody to die. No one else has to die for us to realize Trump failed us on coronavirus. In other words, if you believe that coronavirus will affect how people vote, you shouldn't need any more deaths. You shouldn't need anybody else to die from the virus, either for political or mathematical reasons, as we're talking about, for us to know Trump's biggest test so far has been coronavirus, and he's failed. He's being tested on the civil unrest. He's also failing there. We shouldn't need anyone else to die to be able to say he failed us and he needs to go. Last thing on this. Coronavirus is also disproportionately affecting poor people and communities of color. Those are communities that disproportionately vote for Democrats over Republicans. So the older folks, which is a group that has been better for Trump and for Republicans, they're, of course, the most at risk from an age perspective. But you also have communities of color and poor communities that are disproportionately affected. Those are not communities that are likely to go to Trump. So I would even challenge the assertion that we started with, which is that it is simply going to be split primarily among party lines based on following or not following social distancing guidelines. In the end, 130 million people voted in 2016. Just to affect 1% of the electorate, you need 1.3 million coronavirus deaths. We are nowhere close to that. I hope we are never anywhere close to that. And certainly there's no indication we would be anywhere near that in November. So it is unlikely that the who dies from coronavirus would be enough to flip even a single state, even a state that was really close in 2016 by enough votes to change the outcome. If you disagree with me, let me know. We have a fantastic bonus show for you today. Get instant access by becoming a member at joinpacman.com or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Thanks so much for watching today's full episode of the show. Just a reminder, today's sponsor is Blinkist, the app that lets you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try Blinkist for free and save 25% off of a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've also included the link right underneath this video.